Hey, what is happening, everybody out there? This is Jakejames Lugo from the Koalition.com. I'm sitting down with Richard Wood from Stormcloud Games to talk about Brutal. So, Richard, welcome. Thanks for chatting it up with me today.
No, it's great. Thanks for having me. Excited to be here. Excited to be here.
Nice, that's awesome. So, Brutal. Now, you guys revealed this at PlayStation Experience last year. It had an awesome
Yep.
trailer. It was pretty cool.
Thank you.
Whatnot. So, you guys were also at E3. Now, I never got a chance to actually get hands-on time with it at E3, but for anybody out there that might not know what Brutal is, or maybe missed out on the trailer at PlayStation Experience, tell us a little bit about what is Brutal.
Yeah, sure. The big questions to start off with. I like it. I like it. Just going in big. No, so we describe Brutal as a modern reimagining of the classic ASCII dungeon crawler and roguelike. So basically, by that, what we mean is the game is all procedural. So every playthrough is different in terms of the level layout, the weapons you'll find, the enemies you'll face, the items you'll find. And the aim of the game is to get from level 1 to level 26 without dying. The game does have permadeath as a key feature. Now, one thing we have changed with the game, because we're gamers ourselves, and we realize that you can't always sit down and do like mega sessions, like 4 hours of gaming every night, and then die and lose it all. So we're very aware of that. So we've put in some mechanics that we can talk about later, that sort of counteract that are quite friendly to those people who want to sit down and do a 10-minute session and feel like they've made progress. So it isn't all just about sitting down for hours or days at a time. So players can choose from one of 4 characters as they delve down the dungeon. And as I said, as they progress down, you will find weapons to craft them. You'll brew your own potions. You'll get stronger by leveling up skills and learning new abilities. The game's single player primarily, but it's also got a local co-op option and a dungeon editor. So you can actually make your own levels and share them online with players around the world. And obviously, if you don't want to make your own levels, you can just play people's levels that they've made for you. That'll hopefully add a lot of longevity to the game as you're playing sort of different variations of levels people make. So when I say the game's ASCII inspired, what I mean by that is that roguelikes and dungeon crawlers were originally based on ASCII keyboards, so that the characters on your keyboard. So they were very primitive in terms of their look, aesthetically. They were all about game mechanics as well as some story behind them. So we're in a cool place right now where a lot of developers who grew up playing games are now making games they want to make. And that's kind of what we were doing at Stormcloud, in that our company founder, Frank, he grew up playing ASCII games. He learned to code playing ASCII games. So when he was playing these games, they were top down, very primitive, and he imagined that he was playing this sort of 3D world. And that's what kind of Brutal is. It's our homage to these old games. We've kind of taken a lot of the mechanics and we've taken a lot of the nostalgia from these games, but trying to make it more for a modern audience as well. So there's elements of Tron in there in terms of the color we splashed in and some of the feel of the gameplay. So yeah, that's Brutal in a very quick nutshell.
That's awesome. Yeah, again, just you answered pretty much my next question. I was going to be is like, what was some of like the inspirations for the concept of Brutal? And again, like you said, visually very has a little bit of Tron thrown into it
Yeah,
as far as like very stylized. I think it was looked pretty awesome when I first saw the trailer and have all the lights and stuff like that. You guys really play up that ASCII design. Just crafting weapons has the different types of letters of the alphabet into there. There's like the shield looks like it has the little at symbol for some of the
yeah, it does.
characters.
Yeah,
That's pretty awesome. And also, again, anybody that's grew up with Dungeons and Dragons and stuff knows the traditional classes. The warrior, the mage, the ranger, the Amazon. All
yeah,
these different types of like classes and stuff. So let's talk about specifically the gameplay or whatnot. So you said there's about 26 levels in the
yeah.
dungeon per se.
Correct. Yeah,
Now they're all procedurally generated. So basically every time that you go in there is going to be different every single time. Uh,
correct. Yes.
there's a bunch of different weapons that you could find. I think it was a total of like 15 weapons. I think you said you guys had a let's play on your YouTube channel, which is over at youtube.com/stormcloud games, where you guys
Nice. Yeah.
talked about the different weapons. You talked about the different types of potions. There's 9 potions in total that you could actually mix up and get different effects and stuff. So with the procedurally generated dungeons, I mean, did you guys look at other games that have like a similar type of concept, like like Rogue Legacy or anything of the sort, to kind of like borrow ideas or kind of get inspired by that?
So I mean, yes and no. So yes, in the sense that we're basing our game not exactly, but it's again homage to these classic ASCII games that did that originally. But we also play games ourselves. We have played Rogue Legacy, we have played Eldritch, and a bunch of others. So you look at them and try and figure out what they're doing right. And then just as you're developing it and you do play testing, you kind of begin to feel what is maybe right and wrong about it. And I think the thing that we felt, and I know that a lot of people who play these games feel as well, is that sometimes it can feel very samey. Sometimes you feel like I've been here before. So even though it's procedural in a limited sense. So we try to counteract that by I'm meaning about the layout of the level here and the aesthetic of the level. So we try to counteract that by the rooms are all random in terms of size and layout, so the map layout is always random. But we've made hundreds of what we call stamps, and these are basically pre-populated, pre-generated layouts of chairs, tables, fireplaces, like any sort of props you'd find in the world. So we made hundreds of these that the game can choose from. So the game is never relying on trying to build it itself. The game is, making its own unique floor layout and layout of enemies and weapons and so forth. But the art team and the QA team have actually built hundreds of these stamps, we call them, that are all visually different. So you always feel like you go into a different zone or a different area when you go into a new room. And we hope that that will make it feel more unique, and it'll feel like when you go to a new level or you do a level again, that you are seeing something fresh and it's not just the same thing again and again, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes total sense. Now, based off of that, because it's procedurally generated, one of the key things that I've seen in a lot of games, especially when they start getting into the whole realm of co-op and stuff, is that it kind of scales out a little bit, makes things maybe a little bit harder or maybe even a little bit easier, depending on if you're going solo or multiplayer. Does that happen with Brutal?
So in a sense, yeah. So what we've done is we've actually, if you're playing with two players, the game is the same difficulty in the sense that it's the same number of levels. It is the same number of enemies you'll face. Obviously, that number is random, but generally speaking, it'll be the same experience. Now, what we haven't changed though is that you've also got the same items. So you've got two players who are now trying to share the same number of potions, same number of weapons, same number of food. So there's kind of like a management thing there where you're saying, right, cool, I'll give you the axe, you give me the bow. We only have one health potion. You better use it because you're very low in health right now. So it's kind of all about the surviving together. It's kind of what the key concept we use there is. And you need to play together. Now that works very well because things like potions have got splash radiuses. So if you throw it at your friend when you're close together, you'll both take the effect. But obviously you need to try and do that in the heat of battle. It's very hard because if you do that together and an enemy is there, the enemy gets stronger as well. So it's all about trying to survive together, make sure that you are dealing with the dungeon's difficulties together. We also have the idea of reincarnation. So if, let's say we're playing together and you die, I can either reincarnate you right there and then and give you half of my health to give you that health back, or I can leave you because it's too dangerous, a lot of enemies going on, and run to the next level and try and find you in the next level, sort of Left 4 Dead style. So while the game's difficulty is the same in terms of number of levels, room size, enemies you'll face, the difficulty comes in the sort of the scarcity of resources, kind of like a Resident Evil game, like the first ones where you were kind of low on herbs and weapons and ammo and so forth. We try and take that approach, so you really have to work together. So it is very cooperative in that sense.
Yeah, I love that. I love that extra layer of, working together as a team, trying to get through different stuff where you're not just off going and doing your own thing and you're like hoarding all the different types of weapons and like whatnot, items that you can and such. I think that, adding that as, an extra element to not only just getting through every single dungeon, point A to point B and stuff, makes things a lot more dynamic, makes things a lot more interesting. And it kind of reminds me of, again, like some of those older games where, team effects or team attack are kind of on, quote unquote. And I don't think that this is necessarily like team attack, but again, throwing a potion, you both are going to get those effects no matter what it is, whether it's good or bad. One of the other things I want to talk about the potions in particular, because I like this idea of that when you discover a potion or you find a potion or you mix a potion, you don't necessarily know what it is. You're not outright told what the effects are and such. I mean, did you guys have that in mind, when you guys were first coming up with the concepts of like, using items or coming up with the potion mixing, to kind of, make it so there's a risk reward type of element to that?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, that's one of our favorite mechanics from the early roguelikes. Now, they were actually a lot harsher than us in that some of their potions were like, you die, so
Oh,
they have
that's
some
just
very,
cool.
yeah, that is cool, yeah. So, I mean, hours in and you die. So, we don't have that. Ours are kind of more, I guess you would say, standard. So, you've got health, you've got poison, you've got inferno, you can get stronger, you can get weaker, and so forth. So that's definitely a part of the fun there. So the basic concept is that we find a blue potion on this playthrough, let's say on your first playthrough, that may be health, but you don't only know that if you drink it yourself or throw it at an enemy. So there's a risk reward there, like you mentioned, in the sense that if you drink it, cool, you may get stronger, but it may not be health. You have no idea. So you've got to kind of choose based on how you're doing in the level. Do you want to use this on yourself? Are you strong enough to take the hit, or do you want to try and find an enemy that's maybe quite weak, So if you do throw a health potion at them, it doesn't matter if they get stronger. So that's kind of the mechanic we've got. And then we like the idea of the game always being different on each playthrough. So if you start a new playthrough, or if you die and are forced to start a new playthrough, those potions randomize again, and they will randomize on every single playthrough. But once you learn what they are on your current playthrough, that is saved forever. So you aren't always remembering it. The game will tell you, hey, remember, blue is health, remember, or green is poison. It only changes on a per playthrough basis.
Okay, because that was going to be my next question. Is like, because I know some of the potions are color coded. Does that necessarily mean that, again, if there's a potion of Inferno that's red, like that, would it necessarily have a different effect on a different person's playthrough?
Yes, yes. If so, kind of imagine that they are not related. So even though we always think of, health is a red potion, for example, or green is a poison potion, depending on what kind of games you play, ours are always random. So while on one playthrough, a fire potion, an inferno potion could be red, on the next one it could be blue. So the potion types are always the same. So there's always a fire potion, there's always a health potion, there's always a poison potion. But what color they are, where you find them in the dungeon, or when you craft in the dungeon, that will always randomize. So you may learn on playthrough one that red equals health, but on playthrough two, you can't assume that anymore because it's randomized again. Red could be something completely different.
That's pretty cool. Now, let's talk about the weapons. Now, I love this idea of, getting the different types of letters of the alphabet to kind of craft the weapons, as you find them in the dungeons and stuff. One of the things I was always curious about, as I looked at some of the different videos that you guys were doing in the Let's Plays on your channel, was if you had the ability, every class I'm pretty sure is able to use just about every weapon, but would you be able to kind of, as you level up or as you discover different things in the dungeon, be able to kind of unlock or kind of like use different abilities that are maybe exclusive to a specific class?
So no. So the way that works is that every character is unique when they start off. So the warrior, for example, he will deal more damage. He's got more health, but he's a little bit slower. Whereas the mage, he has lower health, deals lower damage, but he can fire magic, so you can kind of do more ranged magic attacks. However, with the mage, you could, as you progress down, you will gain XP, you unlock new skills and abilities. You could actually level up your mage and learn new skills that make him have more health, make him do more damage, and therefore become sort of like a battle mage almost, where he's firing spells and using his axe. And same for the warrior. So it's more of those starting abilities that are different. And obviously, with leveling up, that all depends on how much you do of that. So think of it like Diablo, if you will, in that everything you destroy in the game, you'll get XP for, but you'll also get possibly loot for that as well. So the more exploring you do, the more destruction of the environment or to the props and killing enemies, the more XP you'll get, the more you'll level up. But obviously, by doing that, you're fighting more enemies, you're putting yourself more at risk. So you may actually take more damage then than if you would just kind of make a beeline for the exit. So there is sort of a balance there, and that'll depend on your current health, your play style, and your aim for that play session. But no, characters can learn any abilities. It's just a matter of leveling them up through the XP system, through the skill tree system.
That's pretty interesting. Again, it kind of like opens up, as you get more deeper and later into the game, like you're not kind of limited there. And I love stuff like that, where again, like you said, like being able to become a mage that just does devastating physical attacks like that later on into the game and stuff. I think that's
Yeah.
pretty cool. Now, going off that whole thing that you mentioned about exploring, destroying the environment and looking around for different stuff, are is there going to be like moments when, as you're exploring the different levels of the dungeons, where you'll be able to kind of like find little hidden areas, like maybe something that might not appear on your map, but because you go over there and maybe you hit something, kind of like in a Metroidvania style game where you're able to find like a secret room or maybe another passageway to another part of the stage.
There is, yes. I don't want to give it away how you'll do that, but there are definitely secret areas in the room and in the game, yes.
Okay, that's pretty cool. So one of the other things I was also curious about was these altars that you have, which are kind of like the offerings to the gods, where as you discover loot, you could offer to the gods, you could get different, was it, you could get more lives and stuff like that. But are
Yeah, yeah.
those little like altars, depending on what you give to the gods here or there, more or less, would you be able to get like different effects besides extra lives, or are they just limited to just getting extra lives being reincarnated?
Oh, that's my alarm going off. Apologize. Bad timing. It is mainly life, but that kind of ties back to our earlier point about gameplay sessions and playing the game. So I mentioned that obviously we're gamers ourselves and we all love playing games, but you can't always dedicate hours at a time to play a game. And I think that's where roguelikes excel but also fail, in that when you do finish them or you do progress, they feel very, very rewarding. But there's a problem there in the sense that if you can only dedicate 20 minutes to a game, and you can't save it, or there's no sort of progression carry on, it becomes very, very difficult to kind of dedicate that time. That's why a game like, I think, Rogue Legacy did a great job in the sense that even if you die, you're kind of getting loot and you're getting stronger for your next run. Now, while we don't do that, we've kind of brought our own take on that system in. So firstly, you can save the game at any point. So if you get to level 2, let's say, or level 5 or whatever, you can save the game right then, turn your PS4 off and come back at a later date. So you could literally play the game for 5 minutes or 5 hours and you can save your progress and come back later. For us, that's very important. The next thing is tied to your question with God Altars, is as you explore the level, you'll find loot. You'll find currency, gold, basically. And the more you explore, the more loot you find. And then, as you mentioned, you find these God Altars. And these God Altars are, again, they're random, but you'll find them generally every level. And you'll offer your gold to the God Altar. And if you offer an amount that gods deem acceptable, which is random, they will give you an extra life. So when you die, you'll reincarnate where you died. You'll have full health. You'll be protected for a few seconds. You won't die again instantly, and you can carry on with that. And these lives stack as well. So you may get one life on level 1, another one level 5, and so on and so on. So you can actually stack these lives. The more loot you find, the more offerings you give. Now, obviously, there's a risk reward there in the sense that the more you explore, the more you kind of being at risk of fighting more enemies. So while you'll find more loot, you may lose health because of that. The other thing is that while your offering to the gods is random, so let's say you got 500 loot, you offer it to the gods, they may give you an extra life, perfect.
Yeah.
But you may offer that, and they might think, actually, that's not enough, and they will actually destroy the altar where you are and take your 500. Now, that 500 will stay there as an offering. So when you go to the next floor, if you offer 100, it'll be 600. But now you know for that whole floor, you cannot get an extra life, and you're now going to get to the next floor, find it again, and offer again. So you've got to decide, will I try and be frugal and offer the lowest amount and try and get an extra life, or will I go overboard and offer it all to guarantee that life, but mean that I've got less money on the next floor? And that'll be a kind of a personal preference based on how much you're exploring, how many life you've already got, how strong you feel at that point. You may feel like actually you're doing very, very well, and you'd rather save your loot and offer it on the next floor for a guaranteed life. So in terms of the loot and other aspects, why you wouldn't want to use loot is, and this is again, will only impact certain players who've got this sort of desire, but the game's also got leaderboards. So, your kills, your time played, and your loot all go to 3 individual leaderboards. So if you want to be, the player with the most loot in the world, you don't offer your loot. You need to save that loot until the very, very end. And then when you finish the game, that loot is posted to the leaderboards, and you will, kind of go up the rankings. But obviously, by not offering your loot, you then risk the fact that you may die and lose that and start again.
That's a huge element of risk and reward there. I think that's going to be very interesting when the game releases, to see like who could get towards the end of the game and just have the most amount of loot possible out there. That's going to be very, very cool. So tell me a little bit about enemies. Now, I love some of the stuff I'm seeing in the gameplay that you guys have posted around with some of the enemies, having specific types of weapons or being a specific type of enemy, like having a certain element to them. For example, one of the things I think is pretty cool is the zombies, where the zombies, when you kill them with, different types of weapons, they respawn back. But if you use fire, you pretty much kill them permanently. And I thought that was like such a neat kind of like addition to some of the combat against, that particular type of enemy. And I was curious, are we going to see other types of enemies, or just, other little kind of like, twists and turns like that as you run into more types of baddies as you go through each level?
Yeah, definitely. So, I mean, it's all a balance. And I think the zombies are our kind of very early on way of explaining to the player that certain enemies require certain mechanics to kill them. So they're kind of like a basic example of that. But later on, we've got 2 or 3 more enemies that will require you to kill them either in certain windows or via certain tactics. And that will add a different sort of strategy to the player. Now, that's not every enemy. In fact, I'd say 90, maybe 95% of them don't have that. But we do have a couple of enemies that do have that to kind of challenge you at later points. But it is a balance. You don't want that for every enemy. It'll become a bit overbearing. But in terms of how we do enemies and how we kind of, I guess, progress difficultly, is that you will, on every floor, generally speaking, sometimes more than that, but you'll meet a new enemy or 2 on every floor. And you'll meet them on their own. It'll be the basic enemy, say the orc. So you'll fight the orc, learn his tactics. He's very, very fast. He deals medium damage, but his strength is he's faster than the player, so you can never really outrun the orc. Once you've kind of defeated him, you'll then on a later level, maybe meet one or two of them. You start meeting enchanted versions, and by that we mean that you'll meet a fire orc. So when he hits you, he'll deal the base damage and set you on fire. You'll meet the frozen orc. Let's say when he hits you, you'll deal the base damage and freeze you in spot, so he can hit you again very quickly. And again, you'll learn how to defeat these different enemies or enchanted enemies. But then what we do is we'll start taking the strength of certain enemies and combining them in with other enemies for their weaknesses. So my example for that is that we've got a troll in the game. And the troll is kind of as you expect. He's very slow. He's very lumbering. But he does a lot of damage if he catches you. But because of his slowness in terms of speed and attack speed, he's very easy to dodge, to kite, to deal damage to. So what we do later on is we'll combine him with some frozen skeleton archers. And these archers will fire their bows at you, the arrows at you from long range. And if they hit you, they can freeze you in position for a couple of seconds, allowing the troll to get close to you and actually damage you for that high damage value that you'd normally be able to avoid. So there, you're now kind of facing two different scenarios. You've got these archers who will deal very little damage to you, but can kind of put you in peril, and this kind of slow troll. So you're now trying to avoid multiple enemies, multiple attack types. And it's up to you to decide, do I go for the archers first, or do I use my shield? You've got a shield in the game. Do I use my shield to try and deflect and block these arrows? Now, if you deflect them, you basically time it correctly, and you can actually hit the arrow somewhere else. So you could actually fire the arrow back towards that skeleton, towards the troll, and deal damage to them.
Like a parry.
Exactly, yeah, parry, exactly, yeah. But that's a sort of a skill or a time-based thing you maybe won't get exactly, or at least immediately. So you're then trying to figure out your best way of defeating that group. And that is just one of, I wouldn't say 100, but near 100 combinations we've got later on of trying to combine these enemies together that are maybe weak on their own, but when you bring them into with other enemies or other types of enemies, it becomes more difficult and you're challenged in a different way you weren't expecting. Now, the mechanics are still the same, the enemy is still the same, but the minute they are paired with someone else, they become different because why they're weak is now removed, and you're trying to almost bring back that weakness in many regards.
That's pretty cool. Now, one thing I am curious about is because, again, multiple enemies, together, they're different types. They have both the best of both worlds there when you're fighting them and such. Did you guys ever play around with the idea of maybe having like a couple super strong enemies that have multiple types in of themselves? Like, for example, like a giant minotaur or something that when he hits you, he's not only fast, he deals damage and stuff, but maybe when he hits you, he maybe deals fire damage on top of that, on top of something else. Maybe like, again, mixing any sort of like, some of the elements and stuff that you guys have with some of these different baddies.
Yeah, definitely, and that's a good segue to the Minotaur, actually. So we do have a Minotaur in the game, and he is, as you'd expect, he basically charges at you. He will kind of lock onto you, he'll charge at you, you have to dodge him. If he hits you, he will deal damage to you. He will actually knock you down, so you'll fall on your back. Again, that will allow other enemies to hit you. But if he's an enchanted variant, let's say it's a fire Minotaur, he will hit you, deal damage, set you on fire, and knock you back. But he's very telegraphed in the sense that he is, if you know he's coming, once you've met him once, you can easily dodge him. But again, once he's combined with other enemies, or there's two Minotaurs, it becomes more of a challenge. But no, definitely, the enchanted enemies will always add an effect to you, which can deal damage, and then certain enemies can knock you back, or cause other effects, like other status effects, that will kind of hinder you in many ways.
That's pretty neat, and I can only imagine because going off the PSX trailer, when you guys had that dragon there, I can imagine like that thing like having like 3 or 4 different effects as like a major bad guy, like a super hard boss fight and stuff. Just randomly thrown in there. Is that dragon in the game? That we saw
yes.
This? Nice.
Yes, that is the without giving too much away. This is common knowledge, but that is who you will face on the last level. How you face them, what happens, I cannot say, but that's who you're trying to face at the very end of the game.
I hope it's something epic. I can't wait to see how that plays out. Just based off of everything I've seen, it sounds like it's be very cool. Now, tell me a little bit about the dungeon creator, because again, dungeon creator, from my understanding, you're able to build up your own levels. Place enemies, place different obstacles and stuff. How in depth does that get?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So we're actually going to be in the next week or so releasing a trailer for how that kind of works. But the way we kind of describe it and the way we want to make it feel is it's kind of like placing Lego blocks, if that makes sense. So you've got these menus where you can say, cool, I want to place floor tiles, and you will get the chunk of the floor tile, the Lego block floor tile, and you'll just kind of click it down. You can place things next to it. So it does almost feel like you're just placing down puzzle pieces or Lego blocks, and you're building the level out like that for the foundation. After that, you then select the items you want, and place them down on top of that as well. So you can make anything that you see in the game and then some. I'll be honest, I'm very bad with the editor. I'm not creative in that sense. But some of our QA testers have made some great levels. They've made levels you expect, dungeon crawling levels. Some of the guys have also made levels which are kind of more like running levels, where actually with the minotaurs, where you'll spawn in and immediately you'll have these 10 minotaurs chasing towards you. And if they hit you, you'll die because there's so many of them. So you're trying to run from these guys, jump over things, escape them. We've had other levels which are platforming levels, so they kind of remove the idea of enemies completely, and they will basically place the lava down, and then they'll place like stools in the lava or little small tiles, and the aim is to try and get across to the end of the level and survive. So there's a wide variety of things you can do, but the best way I can describe in terms of how you would use it is to think of it like building a map or a kind of a level out of Lego, if that makes sense. So we try to keep it very intuitive and very simple in terms of just placing things down and building out rooms. So it is quite straightforward in that sense. Now, we also have, as you expect in kind of this day and age, when you make a level, you can share it online and friends can play it. But the only way you can share it online is if you can complete it yourself. So there'll be no levels online that are impossible. Like every level you play online, someone had to make and complete themselves in the way that you would finish it and play it. So you'll never be stuck. But yeah, you can make anything you want. You can place the items you want. You can place the weapons you want, the potions you want. You can place the enemies you want. So you can create almost like a Dungeons and Dragons scenario for a friend to play and take on, or anyone in the world to play and take on.
That's awesome. Thank God, because we don't need any more super unfair levels out there from people creating and stuff. Now, one of my questions is that with whatever you're able to do with the level creator like that, are you able to maybe connect different levels together, like as opposed to just having just one level beginning and then that's that? Are you able to maybe create like multiple levels like connected together? Let's say like you have like 3 levels that you've done with the dungeon creator like that. Are you able to kind of like have it so that way when a person goes through them, it's like here's 3 floors just to kind of go through?
Yeah. So I mean, I think it's a good idea. But sadly not. No. It's just one level you create, or one floor, I guess you create, and that's the dungeon floor that people will play.
Oh, okay, cool. So either way, my other question that I wanted to know about is, again, since we were referring to online and stuff, and you guys have local co-op, was there ever a thought of maybe implementing online play, online co-op?
I'll be honest, no, never a thought. And I think that's a case of, I mean, we're a new team in many regards. This is our first PS4 and PC title as a team. The guys have made titles before, many titles before in the past actually. But I think when it comes to it, you need to be realistic with what you can do. I mean, with single player co-op, local co-op obviously, and the editor, that was already kind of quite a lot we're adding in there. And then to try and add in network play, as well as sort of online connectivity, I think it would have been a lot to try and get in a certain time frame, and I think other parts of the game would have suffered because of it. So it never crossed our mind. I think it would be cool. Don't get me wrong, but I think we see a lot of games come out with online play kind of added in. It never maybe works at launch, or there are problems with it. And from a developer side, I always wonder if they didn't do that and they spent that time on single player or the co-op or whatever it was that was in this game, that part of the game would have been better. So I know people want to see online co-op, and I understand that, but I think if we were to stick to our same time and budget, we would have put it in, but it may not have been as good as you would want it to. And at the end of the day, if someone's buying our game, we want it to be as good as possible.
Yeah, I think that's a great mentality to have, a great approach. Like one of the first things that I said to myself was like, again, I would love to play this online with like a friend, because maybe I might not be able to get like a friend or two here to actually play with me, but I think that that's a good approach to it. Like just have your core gameplay and have your core game itself, really solid by the time you release it and stuff, and then think of stuff like that maybe down the line.
Yeah,
But
definitely.
I wanted to know also, because you guys have 4 classes, and because this is like a dungeon crawler type of game and such, did you guys even also think about the idea of maybe having more than 2 player co-op and local? Like again, having the ability to have 4 people, one for each class like that.
I mean, I think it crossed our mind at certain points, but I think if we were to do that, we have to make co-op quite different. And as I mentioned at the kind of the start of the interview, the way our co-op works is it's basically the same single player game. We just make it harder by sort of the resources and limiting that. I think if we added in a third or fourth player, that would quickly fall apart, and we would need to really change the game in terms of difficulty or scope. And I think it would have been kind of a rabbit hole that would have added a lot more work to the project. So we decided to keep it with 2 to kind of make it that tight experience.
That's pretty interesting. Now, based off of that, also, were there any like ideas or concepts for classes that maybe didn't make the cut? That probably as you guys were deciding, like, okay, this could be like a warrior class, Amazon, etc. and stuff. Were there maybe any ideas that you guys kind of bounced around about that?
I mean, yes and no. I think one that kind of comes up a little bit is, we've got a dwarf in the game who's actually an enemy, and a lot of people internally and externally thought he could be a good character to play as well. But in the end, we thought he can become a kind of cooler enemy to face in the game and face off again. So we tried to keep to more of those archetypal characters that you're kind of used to. So with those 4, we felt we had that covered. We could have added more in, and we definitely did discuss more. But we felt those 4 were kind of the classic characters, perhaps minus dwarf, that you expect to face in a game like this.
Would you guys ever be opposed to the idea of maybe adding other classes down the line, way after release or so, like, different types of character classes with different various and unique abilities?
Yeah, I mean, never say never, but that's one thing that we decided quite early on was that we weren't going to think or put any time into after content or DLC, I guess you would say. With again, similar to the multiplayer stuff, was that we didn't want to split our focus and make the launch game worse. So we decided just to kind of go, look, we might come to this later, but let's for now not worry about how we add this in. Let's just worry about getting the core game done. Because even if you don't start doing that right now, you need to plan how you'll do it later. So if we think, hey, we're going to add in a dwarf, or we're going to add in, 4-player multiplayer, whatever it is we're going to add in, you kind of need to put the hooks in there for that as you're developing, going, okay, let's not make this impossible in 2 months' time. And by doing that, while you're not making the feature, you're thinking about it, you're designing it, you're doing art for it, spending kind of code time on it to make sure that you can do it later. And that time, maybe it'll be like, say, an hour a day, but over a few months that builds up, and that can be, several bugs that you didn't fix, or just making it less polished than it was. So we decided quite early on that we weren't going to focus too much on that, and again, just make sure that the launch game was spot on.
Yeah, I think that's great. Make the game good, and then one step at a time. Take everything else later and take it in stride. Now, obviously, games on PlayStation 4, there's plenty of us, myself included, that care about trophies and such. Have you guys thought a little bit about that, or at least, have kind of like, talked about it internally about trophies, or like how that would actually work for all of us that are going to be playing the game on launch day?
Yeah, definitely. So I'm a huge fan of Kind of Funny, and I know, listen to those guys, that trophies are very important. I'm also now recovering Xbox 360 achievement hunter. I don't do it anymore. I'm past the dark side, thank God. But I think they're very important, and I think, especially with games that are harder or labeled as harder, I think you kind of want that reward of trophies as you're playing through it. So we do have a platinum trophy. None of our trophies are unfair, in my opinion, and they're all definitely achievable by just playing the game. So we do have platinum trophy, and I think it will be rewarding. So that is definitely something we spoke about early on, and we knew we had to get a platinum, so we pushed for that quite aggressively.
Yeah, those guys are going to be super happy. I think everybody that trophy hunts is going to be super happy then. That sounds awesome. Well,
Thank you.
Any other final like things that you got that you want to, was it kind of tell everybody that might be curious about the game, or any other like, little things that you want to get everybody excited about for Brutal, because the game's coming out in a couple weeks.
Yeah, no, I mean, honestly, I think your questions have been fantastic. I think you've asked me about, the game, the co-op, the editor, how weapon crafting works and potions work. So, I mean, I think that kind of covers the core of the game. We spoke about enemy diversity and the squad diversity as well. So I think that, for me, covers the core of the game. As you mentioned, we do launch on August 9th. And you can actually, if you want, you can pre-order the game right now. We're part of the Summer Play promotion. The game, if you're a PS Plus member, it's currently got a 20% discount on it. So it's
Yep.
$14.99 and then take away 20%. And it's £11.99. So
And there's
we
also a
think we
PS
priced it.
theme, right? There's also a PlayStation
There
theme.
is, yeah, exactly, yeah. So if you pre-order it, you'll get an ASCII-inspired theme for your PlayStation as well. And I believe, I can't remember the exact figure, but I think it's if you pre-order 2 of the games in the promotion, you'll also get a 20% off discount to use at a later date on any game you want, which is kind of cool. Obviously, that involves you getting 2 games, but if you are interested in any of the games in the promotion, and grabbing 2 of them will get you the base discount plus an extra voucher to use later on.
Get it for you and a friend. There you go.
There you go. I like it. I
That's
like it.
pretty awesome. So really, Richard, thank you. I really appreciate it coming on talking about Brutal. They can find you on YouTube. It's Stormcloud Games. This is your YouTube channel, correct?
Correct, you're right.
And then also on Twitter, it's Stormcloud Games as well, at Stormcloud Games.
That's it. Yeah, Stormcloud Games everywhere. We've been very lucky with that.
Nice. That's awesome. So it makes things easier.
Yeah, definitely.
So, but yeah, check that out, guys. Again, you've probably been seeing all the footage and whatnot as we've been talking and stuff. So definitely check out Brutal when it releases August 9th, both on PlayStation 4 and PC. I will talk to all of you guys again real soon. Peace out. Stay epic, everybody.